Mara Vell, 44-year-old wife of Calder Vell, stood outside Vell Prestige Motors in her plain dark coat, while wealthy buyers, staff, camera crews and influencers gathered for Calder's biggest annual sales event. Calder Vell, 46-year-old husband of Mara and owner of the luxury dealership, smiled beside a brand-new company Porsche and said loudly, "Your little paycheck could not even cover the tires on this car." The crowd heard everything. So did Enid Vell, 73-year-old mother of Calder, who smiled like Mara deserved the shame. And in the passenger seat sat Sloane Pike, 43-year-old best friend of Mara and Calder's mistress, waving like she had already taken Mara's place. No one defended Mara. Staff looked away. Customers whispered. Bram Cole, 35-year-old accountant at the dealership, nearly stepped forward, but stopped when Calder glared at him. Mara's fingers shook around the folder in her hand, but her face stayed calm. To everyone watching, she looked like a discarded wife standing beside an old silver sedan while her husband drove another woman past her in a Porsche. Calder laughed because he believed her silence meant weakness. Sloane smiled because she thought luxury had chosen her. Enid looked proud because she believed her son had finally outgrown the woman who helped him start. But what none of them knew was that Mara had already signed the papers. Through Silver Ledger Holdings, her hidden finance LLC, Mara had quietly bought the defaulted dealership debt from the bank after Calder ignored repeated cure notices and buried the warnings under event brochures. The showroom, the Porsche, the luxury cars, and the empire Calder bragged about were all tied to secured debt he had treated like personal property. For years, Mara had kept every document, every notice, every payment record, every savings transfer, and every proof of how she helped him build the business he now claimed was self-made. Then Calder drove Sloane past her slowly, splashing rain near Mara's shoes, and said, "Don't wait up. Some of us have real business to handle." That was the moment Mara stopped being the wife he mocked and became the creditor who would decide what happened next. This is not just a story about betrayal. It is about what happens when a man humiliates the only woman holding the proof, the debt, and the legal power to expose his fake kingdom. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. Subscribe and stand with every quiet person who was betrayed, mocked, and underestimated before finally rising. Comment where you are watching from. The loan officer closed the folder, and Calder's dream almost died in the sound. Across the table, Calder Vell, 34-year-old husband of Mara and a struggling luxury car salesman trying to open his first dealership, froze in his chair. His smile stayed on his face, but his eyes lost their confidence before the rejection even came. Alden Keel, 48-year-old senior lending officer handling Calder's business loan application, removed his glasses and looked at the thin file in front of him. "Mr. Vell," Alden said, "your ambition is clear. But ambition is not collateral." The room went quiet. Beside Calder sat Mara Vell, 32-year-old wife of Calder and a financial restructuring analyst, wearing a simple navy blazer and holding a leather folder on her lap. Under the table, she felt Calder's knee press against hers. He was trying not to shake. At the far end sat Enid Vell, 61-year-old mother of Calder and mother-in-law of Mara, with pearls around her neck and judgment in her eyes. Beside Mara was Sloane Pike, 31-year-old best friend of Mara, who had come to support the couple but kept glancing at Calder like his failure made him more interesting to save. Alden tapped the file. "Your credit history is thin. Your projections are too optimistic. Your inventory plan is too large for your starting capital, and you have no strong reserve if the first few months go badly." Calder leaned forward. "I can sell cars. I know people. I know what they want." "That may be true," Alden said, "but the bank needs more than belief." Calder looked crushed. Mara did not look at him when she opened her folder. That was the part he never knew. For weeks, while Calder slept beside unfinished business plans and told himself the dealership was almost ready, Mara had been fixing the parts he did not understand. She had reviewed every number after work. She had cut his first inventory plan from 10 cars to 4. She had rewritten his cash flow projections so they included slow months, late buyers, insurance costs, repair costs, licensing fees, payroll pressure, and emergency expenses. But she had done more than paperwork. Quietly, without telling Calder, Mara had called people from her late father's finance network. She had asked them to review Calder's application honestly, not kindly. She had contacted Hollis Ray, 55-year-old debt portfolio advisor and longtime professional contact of Mara's late father, and asked him to examine the revised plan before the bank saw it. She had also done something Calder would have refused if she had told him. Mara moved part of her own savings into a restricted reserve account under her name. The money did not become Calder's. It did not become a gift. It remained hers, but the bank could verify it as support behind the loan package. If the dealership stumbled during the first months, the reserve made the lender believe the risk could survive a bad start. Calder thought the bank was judging his dream. Mara knew the bank was judging whether she had made his dream survivable. She also knew Calder's pride. If she told him how much she had done, he would feel small before he felt grateful. But she let him believe she was only helping with forms and numbers. Mara slid the folder across the table. "I prepared a revised package," she said. Calder turned to her. "Mara," she kept her eyes on Alden. "The first inventory cycle should be smaller. 4 used vehicles, not 10. Insurance needs to be prepaid for 3 months. Repair reserves need to be included before profit. And the repayment schedule should assume slow sales, not perfect ones." Alden opened the folder. Inside were projected cash flow sheets, repayment schedules, used car inventory estimates, insurance quotes, startup cost breakdowns, proof of reserve funds, family finance references, and a cleaner business plan than Calder had prepared. Alden's expression changed. He reached one page and paused. "Hollis Ray reviewed this," Mara nodded. "He reviewed the numbers. He did not approve them as a favor." Alden looked from the letter to Mara, not Calder. "Hollis does not attach his name to weak numbers," he said, "and your father's network still carries weight in this room." Calder smiled as if the compliment belonged to both of them. Mara smiled softly and said nothing. That was love, at least the way she understood it then, helping him stand tall, even if she had to stay invisible beneath the foundation. Enid shifted in her chair. "Well," she said, "paperwork is helpful, but let's not act like signing forms is the same as building a business." Mara heard the insult. Calder heard it too. He did not defend her. He was too busy staring at the conditional approval sheet Alden had placed on the table. That silence was small, but it planted a pattern. One day Calder would let Enid say worse. One day he would let another woman say worse. And every time, Mara would remember this first moment when he chose excitement over defending her. Alden approved the smaller loan package with stricter conditions. Calder signed quickly, barely reading the terms. Mara read every line. Floor plan financing, personal obligations, secured inventory, reserve expectations, default triggers, inspection rights, recovery rights. She understood what Calder did not. Money was not just money, it was proof, it was leverage, it was protection. That lesson came from Dorian Vale, Mara's late father, and the man who taught her finance before she became an analyst. She remembered him at their old kitchen table, tapping a bank statement with one finger. "People forget promises, Mara," he had told her. "Paper does not." After the signing, Mara made copies of everything near the hallway copier: original loan documents, savings transfer receipts, personal guarantees, floor plan financing terms, emails from Hollis, insurance estimates, Calder's signed obligations. Bram Cole, 23-year-old part-time bookkeeper Calder had hired to help with early dealership records, noticed the growing stack in her hands. "You keep everything," Bram said. Mara gave him a tired smile. "Only things people might forget." At the bottom of one private note in her folder was a name Calder had never seen. Silver Ledger. It was not a company yet. Not officially. It was only an idea Mara had written months earlier after helping another struggling business restructure debt. One day she wanted to build something of her own, something quiet, clean and strong enough to protect people from the financial traps proud owners ignored. Calder never asked about the note. He was too busy celebrating the loan he thought his charm had won. An hour later, they stood at the tiny used car lot Calder had rented. The pavement was cracked. The banners were faded. 4 old cars sat under the afternoon sun. Calder walked between them like they were already luxury machines. Sloane hugged Mara from behind. "One day, you'll be the woman behind an empire." But while she said it, her eyes moved toward Calder and the approval papers in his hand. Calder stood beside the first car and smiled. "One day, this place will have glass walls, marble floors, and cars rich men dream about." Mara stepped beside him. "Just promise me when that day comes, you'll remember who stood with you when the pavement was cracked." Calder kissed her forehead. "Always." Behind them, Enid watched with cold pride. "A man like Calder won't stay small forever," she murmured. Mara thought success would prove her love. She did not know the secret help she gave him that day would become the truth he would spend years trying to erase. And the first person who noticed Mara keeping proof would become the same man who warned her when Calder finally started hiding debt. The camera light flashed on, and Calder smiled like a man who had never begged a bank for anything. Behind him, a black luxury SUV sat under white showroom lights. The paint was so polished it reflected his suit, the glass walls, the champagne bar, and the gold letters on the wall that read VLL Prestige Motors. A camera operator counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Calder lifted his chin. "Nobody handed me anything," he said smoothly. "I built this from the ground up." Mara stood 10 feet away, just outside the camera frame, holding a folder full of vendor invoices and payroll questions. The words hit her harder than she expected. They were not loud, they were not shouted, but they erased 12 years in one breath. "Nobody handed me anything." Her fingers tightened around the folder. She could still remember the first lender's conference room, the weak coffee, the cold table, and Calder's hand shaking under hers. She remembered sliding her savings records across the table. She remembered Holly's raise reference letter. She remembered correcting Calder's business plan while he slept in the old office with his jacket over his face. But Calder kept smiling for the camera. The woman beside him smiled too. Sloane Pike stepped into the shot as if she belonged there. She wore a cream dress, a gold bracelet, and the confidence of someone who knew exactly where every camera was pointing. Years ago, Sloane had been Mara's closest friend. Now she was the dealership's image consultant, hired to make Calder's brand look expensive. She reached up and fixed Calder's collar. The touch was quick, but too comfortable, Mara noticed. She told herself not to overthink it. Sloane was stylish. Sloane was bold. Sloane touched everyone when she talked. That had always been her way. Still, Calder did not step back. Sloane smiled at the camera and said, "Calder's brand is finally matching who he always was." Everyone around them nodded like it was a beautiful line. Mara heard something different. She heard Calder had become luxury, and she had become history. A young woman in a headset hurried past Mara with a clipboard. Leela Mott, 27-year-old PR assistant hired by Sloane to manage the dealership's media days, barely looked up as she said, "Ma'am, can you move a little left?" "You're in the reflection." Mara stepped away from the glass. She was not even in the frame, and still she was in the way. At the champagne bar, Enid watched her with a thin smile. The older woman held a glass she had not touched, like it was part of her outfit. "You should smile more, Mara," Enid said. "Women would kill to enjoy the success their husbands build." Mara turned slowly. "I helped build it." Enid gave a soft laugh, the kind that sounded polite only to people who were not listening closely. "Sweetheart, helping when a man is starting out is not the same as being the reason he succeeds." Mara's face stayed calm, but something inside her tightened. Calder was close enough to hear. His eyes flicked toward them. For a second, Mara waited. She waited for the man who had once whispered that everyone would know she was the reason. He did not defend her. Instead, he smiled at the camera crew, then said through his teeth, "Not tonight, Mara. Don't make everything about old sacrifices." Old sacrifices? As if her savings were old. As if the risk she took was old. As if love had an expiration date. Mara looked down at the folder in her hands. Inside were invoices marked overdue, payroll notes with red circles, and a question from a vendor who had called twice that morning. She had not come to fight. She had come to help. Again. Near the office hallway, Bram Cole appeared with a sealed envelope in his hand. Bram was now 35 and the dealership's accountant, older, quieter, and more tired than the young bookkeeper who had once watched Mara copy the first loan papers. His face looked pale under the showroom lights. He moved toward Calder quickly. "Calder," Bram said, keeping his voice low. "This came from the lender. It's marked urgent." Calder did not even take it. "Later," Bram swallowed. "There may not be later." The words cut through the polished noise. Sloane stepped between them with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. "Bram, not during a media walkthrough. Bad energy kills premium sales." Bram looked at Mara. It was only a second, but she caught it. Fear, warning, maybe even apology. Calder waved him away. "Put it in my office." Bram obeyed, but his shoulders were stiff. Mara watched him go. Then she looked through the glass wall of Calder's office. On his desk sat more sealed envelopes. Same lender mark, same urgent stamp. Some were half hidden under glossy brochures for Prestige Week, the dealership's biggest annual sales event. The shine in the showroom suddenly felt thinner. A wealthy buyer stopped near the black SUV. Graham Vale, 52-year-old private client interested in luxury imports, glanced at Mara and asked Calder, "Is your wife involved in the business too?" Calder gave an easy laugh. "Mara has her own little finance job." Little. The word slid into her chest and stayed there. Mara remembered a night years earlier when Calder had fallen asleep on the floor of the old dealership. Rain leaked through the ceiling. The printer had jammed. Their first insurance bill was due. She had stayed awake until 3 in the morning fixing financing applications by hand. When Calder woke, he had found her still working. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he had whispered. Now he acted like she was a small detail he had outgrown. Sloane's laugh pulled Mara back into the present. Mara turned and saw something in Sloane's hand. A Porsche key fob, not a customer key, not a prop. It hung from Sloane's finger like jewelry. The Porsche itself sat under spotlight near the center of the showroom, bright silver, brand new and displayed like the heart of the dealership. Sloane caught Mara looking. She did not hide the key. She smiled, not guilty, territorial. Mara's stomach turned, but she forced herself to breathe. She looked from Sloane to Calder, then to the unopened lender envelopes inside the office. One problem might have been a misunderstanding. 2 problems might have been stress. But this felt like a pattern. Calder was laughing for cameras, while urgent debt letters sat unopened. His mother was rewriting the past. Her best friend was holding keys like she already owned a place in his future. And Mara was standing on marble floors that existed because she once risked everything on cracked pavement. She turned to leave before her face betrayed her. In the hallway, Bram passed close enough to speak without being heard. "If you still have copies of the original floor plan agreement," he whispered, "do not throw them away." Mara stopped. Before she could ask why, Calder's voice cracked down the hallway. "Bram, I said now." Bram stepped back, his warning swallowed by the noise of the showroom. Across the room, Sloane watched Mara with that same soft, dangerous smile. That was the first night Mara understood the dealership was hiding more than debt. And by the way Sloane's fingers curled around the Porsche key, Mara knew the next secret would not stay hidden for long. Mara stopped breathing the moment she saw Calder's hand on Sloane's waist. The service bay door was only half open, but it was open enough. Rainwater still dripped from the metal frame. The wet pavement outside reflected the silver Porsche like a blade. Inside the bay, Calder stood beside the brand-new company car with Sloane close to him, too close to be explained away. Sloane's hand rested on his chest. Calder leaned down and kissed her forehead, not loudly, not wildly, softly. That was what broke Mara, because he had kissed Mara that same way years ago on the cracked pavement of their first little car lot when he had promised he would never forget who stood beside him. Now he was giving that same tenderness to her best friend. Mara had come back to Vel Prestige Motors because Bram's warning from the night before had not left her mind. The urgent lender envelopes, the unopened notices. The words he whispered in the hallway, "Do not throw away the original floor plan agreement." She had planned to ask Calder privately about the debt. Instead, she found betrayal standing beside the Porsche. A young porter froze near the tire rack. Nico Bell, 20-year-old dealership porter who cleaned and moved vehicles for Calder's staff, looked from Mara to Calder and quickly lowered his eyes. 2 salesmen near the parts counter stopped talking. A couple browsing near the glass wall turned their heads. Sloane saw Mara first. For one small second, Mara hoped shame would cross her friend's face. It did not. Sloane stepped back slowly, smoothed Calder's jacket, and smiled like she had been waiting for this moment. "You should talk to your wife before she makes a scene," Sloane said. The words landed like a setup. Sloane had already made Mara the problem before Mara had even spoken. Calder turned. His face changed, but not with guilt. It changed with irritation, as if Mara had walked into a room where she no longer had permission to stand. "Mara," he said, "this is not the time." She looked at Sloane first. "You were my friend." Sloane tilted her head almost gently, but her eyes were cold. "I was," she said, "but friends tell each other the truth. You were never built for this life." Mara felt the sentence tear through years of memories. Sloane had sat with her in cheap cafes while Mara worried about Calder's loans. Sloane had held her hand when the first bank approval came through. Sloane knew about the savings Mara used. She knew about the late nights, the fear, the sacrifices, and still she stood there like Mara was the outsider. Mara turned to Calder. "And you let her say that?" Calder's jaw tightened. His guilt hardened into pride. That was how he protected himself. Whenever truth came too close, he became louder than it. He stepped out of the service bay and raised his voice, enough for the staff and customers to hear. "You want the truth, Mara? I'm done pretending this marriage fits who I am now. Sloane belongs beside me. You belong in whatever small office still makes you feel important." The words did not come like a confession. They came like a public firing. Mara stood still. She did not slap him. She did not scream. She did not beg him to remember the old lot, the bank room, the nights she worked beside him while he slept. Her silence made the room feel colder. "I protected you," she said. Calder laughed, sharp and cruel. "Protected me? Your little paycheck couldn't cover the tires on that Porsche." The salesman looked away. Nico swallowed hard. The couple near the glass wall whispered to each other. Calder's voice carried across the showroom, bouncing off the marble floor and the glass walls he loved so much. Then Enid entered from the main showroom, drawn by the tension like she had been waiting for it. She looked at Mara, then at Sloane, then at Calder. She understood enough, and still she chose her son. "Mara," Enid said, smooth and cold, "don't embarrass him. He has important people watching. This is exactly why you never fit the life he built." Calder heard his mother insult his wife. Again, he did nothing. That hurt more than Enid's words, because Calder's silence had become a habit. First in the lender's office, then at the champagne bar, now here in front of the woman he was leaving her for. Sloane walked to the Porsche and opened the passenger door. The movement was slow, intentional, territorial. She sat down like the seat had been waiting for her. "Calder," she said, looking straight at Mara, "take me for a drive. Let her see what choosing the right woman looks like." For 1 second, Calder hesitated. Mara saw it. There was still a small part of him that knew this was cruel. Then pride won. He took the key, walked around the Porsche and climbed into the driver's seat. Mara followed them outside without meaning to. Her old silver sedan sat near the curb, rain-speckled and plain. The Porsche glowed beside it like an insult on wheels. Calder lowered the window. "Don't wait up," he said. "Some of us have real business to handle." Then he drove forward slowly, not fast, slowly. He wanted her to watch. Sloane turned her head and gave Mara a small wave from the passenger seat. The Porsche rolled past close enough for water to splash near Mara's shoes. For a moment, Mara was not in the dealership lot anymore. She was years back in a cafe with Sloane, both of them younger, both holding paper cups of coffee. Sloane had smiled and said, "You're lucky Calder dreams so big. One day you'll both have everything." Back then, Mara had believed both meant husband and wife. Now Sloane was sitting inside that dream, trying to push Mara out of it. The Porsche disappeared down the wet road. Mara's hands trembled, but her mind did not break. It sharpened. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera. She took pictures before the car turned fully away, Sloane in the passenger seat, Calder behind the wheel, the dealership plate, the event banner in the background, the timestamp, and the VIN visible near the windshield. She did not chase them. She did not key the car. She did not become the scene they wanted her to become. She lowered the phone and whispered, "Company Porsche." That phrase changed everything, because if it was company property, then it was not Calder's toy. It was dealership inventory tied to the floorplan financing line. And if Bram was right about the floorplan agreement, then Calder had just used secured inventory as a weapon to humiliate his wife, while the dealership was already under lender pressure. The service bay door opened behind her. Bram stepped out, pale and tense. He looked down the road where Calder and Sloane had vanished, then handed Mara a folded paper. "I wasn't supposed to show you this," he said. Mara opened it. A line was highlighted in yellow. "Misuse of secured inventory may trigger immediate default review, inspection, and recovery." The wind lifted the edge of the paper in her hands. Mara looked once more at the road. Calder thought he had driven past a broken wife. He did not know he had just handed a future creditor her first clean piece of evidence. Mara's hands were still wet from the rain when she unlocked the fireproof box. The paper Bram had given her lay on her desk, open under the lamp. One sentence was highlighted so brightly it seemed to burn. "Misuse of secured inventory may trigger immediate default review, inspection, and recovery." Her husband had just driven her best friend past her in a company Porsche. He had mocked her income. He had dumped her in front of staff and customers. He had let his mother insult her again. But now, sitting alone in the quiet, Mara did not cry first. She reached for documents that scared her more than tears would have. She removed her wedding ring and placed it beside the highlighted warning. The small sound of metal touching wood made her stomach tighten. For years, that ring had meant loyalty. Tonight, it sat beside proof. Mara opened the old box fully and began pulling out files one by one. Original financing papers, lender approvals, floor plan agreements, savings transfer receipts, emails from Holly's, vendor records, insurance bills she had paid when Calder had no money, tax filings, early payroll sheets, Calder's signed obligations. The stack grew until it covered half the desk. Every page told the truth Calder had erased. She had not been enjoying his success. She had helped build the foundation under it. For a moment, her strength cracked. She saw the old dealership in her mind. Calder asleep in a chair, his jacket over his chest. Her sitting on the floor with a calculator and a pen, fixing his payment schedule while the office heater clicked and failed. He had woken up, looked at her with tired eyes, and whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Now he acted like she was a small, embarrassing detail from a life he had outgrown. Mara pressed her fingers against her eyes, then lowered them. Love had made her protect him, but love had also taught him he could be protected without being grateful. Her phone buzzed. It was Bram. He did not write much. Backlot, 30 minutes, come alone. Mara looked at the message, then at the photo she had taken of Sloane waving from the Porsche. The betrayal hurt like a bruise under her ribs, but the timing mattered. The vehicle, the key, the lender warning. Unopened envelopes, they were no longer separate pieces. They were a pattern. 30 minutes later, Mara parked behind a closed tire shop near the dealership. Bram stood under a weak security light holding a brown folder against his chest. He looked like a man afraid of his own conscience. "You should not have come alone," he said. "You told me to." "I know." He looked toward the road. "I just hate that this is where we are." Mara waited. Bram handed her the folder. "Payroll is delayed again. Vendor checks bounced twice last month. Calder has ignored at least 3 cure notices. Sloane has been using company vehicles for appearances, dinners, photo shoots. Enid told staff not to mention your name in front of clients because it made the brand look dependent on you." Mara's mouth tightened, but she did not interrupt. Bram continued. "He's been moving cars between storage and the showroom to make inventory look healthier than it is. Some vehicles listed as available are tied up in lender disputes, and the Porsche." Mara looked up. Bram swallowed. "It is not his personal car. It is secured inventory, floor plan collateral." The words confirmed what her mind had already feared. Calder had not only used another woman to humiliate her, he had used a lender-backed company asset to do it. Bram rubbed his face. "He keeps telling everyone he is self-made, but the only thing self-made in that building is the mess." Mara looked down at the folder. "Why are you helping me?" Bram's eyes softened. "Because I was there when the first loan closed. I saw you make copies. I saw who read the documents and who only signed them." The answer nearly broke her, not because it was dramatic, because someone remembered. The next morning, Mara went to a quiet legal office with glass walls and no decoration except books. Willa Crane, 46-year-old business attorney Mara trusted from past restructuring work, sat across from her and read silently through the documents. Willa did not gasp. She did not rush. She simply turned each page with careful hands. When she finished, she looked at Mara. "Do you want revenge?" Willa asked. "Or do you want control?" Mara stared at the table. Yesterday, she might have said she wanted her husband back. Years ago, she would have said she wanted him to remember her. But after the Porsche, after Sloane's wave, after Calder's voice saying Sloane belonged beside him, something inside Mara had gone quiet. "I want truth enforced," she said, "without me having to scream it." Willa nodded once. "Then we build this carefully. I need proof of default notices, vehicle misuse, ignored lender warnings, your original financing help, and anything showing company property was used to benefit Sloane. I also need proof honest staff were not responsible. If this moves forward, you do not want innocent people buried with him." Mara opened her bag and placed another folder on the table. Willa looked inside. For the first time, her expression changed. "You already have most of it." Mara's voice was low. "I have been documenting my whole marriage. I just did not know that was what I was doing." Later that day, Mara called Holly's Ray. His voice was cautious when he answered. "Mara, I heard Vel Prestige has problems." "How bad?" A pause. "Bad enough that the bank is considering selling the note. They want the risk off their books." Mara closed her eyes. "Can a private LLC buy it? If the LLC qualifies, has clean funding, and the sale is properly assigned, yes. But why would you ask that?" Mara looked at the small silver folder in her drawer. Silver Ledger Holdings. Calder had mocked her little finance job for years. He had never asked about the distressed debt investments she handled quietly. He had never cared about the small company she built in silence, one cautious deal at a time. He had only seen what she did not show off. "My LLC can qualify," Mara said. Holly's went silent. Then he said, "Mara, if you buy that note, you will not just be his wife. I know, you will be his creditor." Mara looked at the photo of Sloane in the Porsche, the VIN clear near the windshield. For the first time all night, her voice did not shake. Willa slid a debt purchase plan across the table and said, "If Silver Ledger buys this note, Calder will no longer be dealing with a wife he can insult. He will be dealing with his primary secured creditor." Mara picked up the plan. Then she looked at Sloane's frozen wave in the photo. "Then let him keep thinking I'm small." And somewhere inside that quiet sentence, the woman Calder had humiliated began to disappear behind the creditor he had never bothered to see. The pen stopped above the signature line. For 1 second, Mara could not move. Across the table, the purchase agreement waited under the bright lights of the legal conference room. The papers looked clean, almost harmless. White pages, black print, neat tabs, formal language, but Mara knew what they really were. They were the quiet door between being Calder's humiliated wife and becoming the creditor who could take control of everything he had used to shame her. Willa sat beside her, calm and watchful. Hollis sat across from them with his hands folded over a thick bank file. No one rushed her, no one pushed. That made the moment heavier. On the first page, the name was printed clearly. Silver Ledger Holdings. Mara stared at it until the letters blurred. At that same moment, across town, Vel Prestige Motors was glowing under showroom lights. Staff carried black carpet across the marble floor. Event signs were being lifted onto gold stands. The silver Porsche sat on display near the center, polished so brightly it reflected the ceiling lights like stars. Calder stood near the stage, pointing at decorations. "No higher," he snapped at a worker. "This is Prestige Week, not a used car raffle. Everything needs to look expensive." Sloane stood beside him with a clipboard and a smile that made the staff nervous. Enid watched from the champagne bar like the event was a royal ceremony. Calder clapped his hands once. "This event proves we are untouchable." Near the office door, Bram looked up from a stack of unpaid vendor sheets. "Untouchable businesses open their mail," he said quietly. The room went still. Calder turned slowly. His face hardened. "I pay you to count money, not question me." His voice cracked through the showroom. A few employees lowered their eyes. Sloane moved quickly, placing her hand on Calder's arm. "Don't let nervous people infect the room," she said softly. "Tomorrow is about confidence." Calder breathed out and let her calm him, because Sloane always gave him the kind of words his ego wanted. Back in the conference room, Willa turned one document toward Mara. "This confirms the bank's assignment of the note," she explained. "Once Silver Ledger buys it, the bank transfers its creditor rights to your company." Mara listened carefully. She needed every step to be clean. She did not want chaos. She did not want revenge that could be dismissed as emotion. Calder had spent years calling her small. If she acted now, she wanted the law to speak louder than his pride. Willa continued. "Silver Ledger becomes the secured creditor. Calder receives formal notice. A default review can begin. If the review confirms misuse of collateral, false inventory reporting, or risk to secured assets, we can request court-backed recovery. Repossession must be handled by licensed recovery agents. If necessary, we can ask for a receiver to protect the business assets and keep honest staff from being destroyed with him." Mara's eyes lifted. "The staff matter." "I know," Willa said. "That is why we are building this carefully." Hollis opened another folder. "The bank wants this debt gone, Mara. Vel Prestige has missed payments, ignored cure notices, and exposed secured inventory to risk. The Porsche Calder used yesterday is on the collateral list." Mara's jaw tightened at the word Porsche. She saw it again, Sloane waving from the passenger seat, Calder driving slowly past her, rainwater splashing near her shoes. She did not let the memory break her. She let it sharpen her. At the dealership, Enid pulled Calder into his office. The door stayed half open, and Bram heard enough from the hallway. "Mara is jealous," Enid told her son. "She knows she could never build anything like this. She wants you humble because humble men are easier to control." Calder looked through the glass wall at the showroom he loved. "She always wanted me small," he said. The words were cruel because they were the opposite of the truth. Mara had been the first person who believed he could become bigger. She had risked her savings, her family contacts, her sleep, and her peace to help him stand. But Calder had rewritten love as control because that story made his pride easier to carry. In the conference room, Mara finally picked up the pen. Her hand was steady now. She signed the first page. No music played, no thunder rolled, no one smiled, just ink touching paper. Then the second page, then the third. Each signature felt like a thread being cut. As she signed, she remembered Calder years ago, standing in the old lot beside 4 used cars. His shirt had been wrinkled, his eyes tired, his hope almost childlike. "If I ever get arrogant," he had told her, "remind me who I was when I had nothing." Mara had laughed then and touched his cheek. "I will." Now she looked down at the purchase agreement. "I tried," she whispered. Hollis heard her but did not answer. Some grief did not need advice. Later that afternoon, a courier arrived at Vel Prestige Motors with a formal notice addressed to Calder. The return name read Silver Ledger Holdings. Bram saw it first. He carried it into the showroom, where Calder was approving the final placement of the Porsche for the event. "You need to read this," Bram said. Calder took the envelope, glanced at the name and laughed. Silver Ledger Holdings sounds like a fake collection company. Bram stepped closer. It is not fake. Calder's eyes narrowed. You know something? Before Bram could answer, Sloane reached between them and took the envelope from Calder's hand. After Prestige Week, she said, sliding it beneath a stack of glossy event brochures, we need his head in the game. Bram stared at the hidden envelope. That was how Calder stayed unaware. Not because he had not been warned, but because every warning had to fight his ego, his image, and the woman helping him ignore the truth. That night, Mara sat alone in her office with the signed copies in front of her. Her wedding ring was still off. Beside it was the photograph of Sloane waving from the Porsche. Her phone rang. Willa's voice was calm, but every word carried weight. The debt review is scheduled for the morning of Prestige Week. If the misuse is confirmed, we can request immediate recovery. Mara looked at the Porsche in the photo, then at the VIN she had captured near the windshield. It will be confirmed, she said. Outside her window, the city lights blinked like quiet warnings. Calder had laughed at her income. By sunrise, that income, her savings, her contacts, and every document she kept would become the wall he never saw coming. Take it down. Sloane's voice cut across the showroom like a knife. The staff member froze with both hands on the old framed photo. The picture showed Mara and Calder years earlier, standing in front of the tiny first car lot. The pavement was cracked. Calder's shirt was wrinkled. Mara's smile was tired but proud. Behind them, 4 used cars sat under faded banners. Now that photo looked poor inside Vel Prestige Motors. The showroom was alive with noise. Staff polished cars. Lights were being tested. Black carpet was rolled across the marble floor. A stage had been built beside the silver Porsche, which sat under spotlight like the center of Calder's universe. Tessa Vale, 24-year-old junior sales assistant at the dealership who still remembered Mara bringing food to staff during late inventory nights, held the photo tighter. Wasn't Mrs. Vell part of the beginning? She asked softly. Sloane turned slowly. That was before this place became worth talking about. The showroom went quiet enough for a few people to hear. Enid, standing near the champagne display, gave a pleased smile. Exactly, she said. We are selling prestige, not pity. Tessa lowered her eyes and removed the photo from the wall. Across the room, Bram watched everything. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened. When Sloane turned away, he walked to the trash bin, lifted the photo out, wiped dust from the glass, and slid it behind a stack of accounting files in his office. He did not know if Mara would ever want it. But he knew no one had the right to throw away the truth. Near the stage, Reed Fallen, 39-year-old event planner hired to manage Prestige Week for Calder's dealership, spoke into a headset while checking the seating chart. Leela Mott hurried beside him with a clipboard, marking places for cameras and VIP guests. Calder stood on the stage, holding a microphone and staring out across the empty showroom as if he could already hear applause. I built this company from nothing, he said, practicing his speech, with grit, instinct, and no handouts. Bram flinched. Sloane clapped like the line was perfect. Enid stepped closer to the stage. That is it. Strong men do not share credit. Calder smiled. He believed her because her version of him was easier to love. In Enid's story, he was the genius, the builder, the man who rose alone. Mara was only the wife who had enjoyed the view after the climb was over. That lie had become comfortable, and Calder wore it better than any suit. Miles away, Mara sat in her office under one desk lamp while the city outside turned dark. There was no champagne, no music, no black carpet, only files, photos, and the quiet sound of paper moving across wood. Willa sat across from her with a legal pad. Between them lay the evidence file. There were photos of Calder and Sloane in the company Porsche, the VIN near the windshield, the dealership plate. Event banner in the background, lender notices, inventory schedules, payroll delays, bank records, ignored warning emails, original financing documents, proof of Sloane using company vehicles for personal appearances, notes from Bram about Enid pushing staff to erase Mara's role, records showing Calder had moved cars around to make the dealership look healthier than it was. The truth did not look emotional. It looked organized. Willa turned one page slowly. You are allowed to feel angry. Mara looked at the photo of Sloane waving from the Porsche. I am, she said, but anger is not the plan. The plan is the plan. Willa watched her for a moment, then nodded. That is why this works. Mara leaned back in her chair. For the first time that night, the strength in her face cracked. On her desk, beneath a folder, her phone screen lit up with an old saved voicemail. She had found it while organizing evidence. She had not meant to play it, but her thumb moved before her mind could stop it. Calder's younger voice filled the room. Mara, we sold the first car. I swear I'll spend my life making this worth what you gave up. The office became still. Mara closed her eyes. She could see him again as he had been then, younger, tired, grateful, standing on cracked pavement like the world had finally opened a door. She had loved that man. She had protected him not because she was weak, but because she believed love meant standing in front of the storm until the person she loved could stand on his own. But somewhere along the way, Calder had stopped standing beside her. He had started standing on top of what she gave him. Mara stopped the voicemail before it could play again. At the dealership, Bram walked toward Calder with one final warning in his hand. The default review is real, Bram said. Silver Ledger is not going away. Calder's face changed instantly. He stepped off the stage, his voice rising in front of the staff. Enough, you people are acting like my wife, small-minded, terrified, always counting pennies. The staff froze. Sloane smiled faintly because every insult pushed Mara further out of Calder's public story. Calder pointed toward the Porsche. Tomorrow everyone will see who I am. Bram looked at the stage, the lights, the Porsche, and the hidden envelope under the brochures. Then he whispered, yes, they will. Back in Mara's office, Willa placed the sworn creditor affidavit in front of her. This supports the enforcement request if the review confirms misuse, Willa said. Once this is filed, you cannot protect him from the result. Mara looked at the signature line. For years, she had protected Calder from late fees, weak projections, angry vendors, and hard truths. She had protected his pride until his pride became a weapon against her. She picked up the pen. Protecting him, she said, is how he learned to destroy me quietly. Then Mara signed her name. Outside, night settled over the dealership's glass walls, and the Porsche waited under its perfect spotlight, unaware that the paper which could move it was already in motion. You do not walk into my business like this. Calder's shout cracked across the showroom before the first buyers had even arrived. The black carpet for Prestige Week was still fresh. Champagne glasses waited on silver trays. The Porsche sat under its spotlight, polished and perfect, as if nothing ugly could touch it. But near the front entrance stood a man with a grey briefcase, a formal creditor inspection notice, and no interest in Calder's performance. Grant Havel, 50-year-old outside auditor, hired to conduct Silver Ledger Holdings' default review of Vell Prestige Motors, looked at Calder without blinking. Your secured creditor has inspection rights under the agreement you signed. Calder's face twisted. My secured creditor? Grant opened the file. Silver Ledger Holdings is now the secured creditor of record. The banker signed the note. Formal notice was delivered yesterday. Calder's eyes moved toward his office. For 1 second, confusion crossed his face. Then he remembered the envelope, the one Bram had tried to make him read, the one Sloane had slid beneath the glossy event brochures. Sloane stepped closer quickly. This can wait until after the event. Grant looked at her. No, it cannot. Calder laughed, but there was no confidence in it. I was expecting a call, not some stranger marching into my showroom. Grant turned one page. The agreement allows inspection of secured inventory, repayment status, vehicle usage, and collateral location after default. Calder stared at him like the words were in another language. That was the problem. Calder had signed plenty of documents when they gave him money. Had never cared what those documents could take back. Mara had. Across town, Mara sat in Willa's legal office with Hollies beside her. A live update from the review sat open on Willa's laptop. Mara's face was calm, but her hands were folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. She was not in the showroom because Willa had advised against it. Emotion could make clean creditor action look personal. Mara understood. This had to be done properly. Willa watched the screen. Grant is inside. Hollies added, if the records match what Bram gave us, the review will not take long. Mara looked at the folder beside her. It held the old loan papers, her savings transfers, photos of Calder and Sloane in the Porsche, and the highlighted misuse warning. For years, she had used documents to protect Calder. Now the documents were protecting her from being called bitter. Inside the dealership, Grant asked for inventory reports, payment logs, vehicle movement records, insurance notices, and lender correspondence. Bram stepped forward with a locked file box. Calder snapped. What are you doing? Bram did not look away. My job. Sloane appeared from behind the stage display. Her smile looked polished, but her eyes moved quickly from Grant's briefcase to the office hallway. Enid came in behind her, dressed like she was arriving for applause, not an audit. What is this? Enid demanded. Calder pointed at Grant. Some scare tactic. Enid stepped close to him and lowered her voice, but not enough. This is Mara's jealousy. She found some lawyer to scare you. Calder absorbed the lie like air. Mara does not have the money or the nerve, he said. Bram's eyes flicked toward the file box. He knew Calder was wrong about both. Grant began the review in the records room. It did not take long for the truth to surface. First issue was missed payments, then expired cure periods, then vehicles moved without proper reporting, then vendor balances hidden from staff, then payroll delays, then insurance warnings, then lender notices marked urgent but never answered, each document connected to another like a chain pulled from deep water. Grant looked at one report, then another. Several vehicles listed as available were not in their reported locations. Bram nodded. They were moved for showroom appearances. Authorized by the creditor, Bram looked at Calder. Calder said nothing. Grant turned another page. Event deposits were used to cover older vendor balances. Calder shouted from the doorway, "That is normal business management," Grant replied, "not when secured collateral is already in default and creditor notices have been ignored." The words landed hard. In Willa's office, Mara heard the update and closed her eyes. She did not enjoy it. That surprised her. Some part of her had thought revenge would feel like heat. Instead, it felt like a cold room where every lie was being placed on a table. Willa glanced at her. "Still sure?" Mara opened her eyes. "I was sure when he drove her past me." Then Grant found the Porsche usage file. The room changed. Photos from dealership social posts, event planning folders, and staff calendars showed the Porsche used for private dinners, Sloane's promotional appearances, personal errands, and the drive Calder had taken after dumping Mara. The timestamp Mara captured matched the vehicle log. Grant looked at Calder. "This Porsche is secured inventory." Sloane stiffened. Calder said, "It is a company display car." Grant replied, "Then it should not have been used as a personal vehicle while the account was in default." Sloane moved toward the PR station where Leela had left the media laptop open. She clicked fast, trying to delete event photos showing her with dealership vehicles. Bram stepped beside her. "The server backs up automatically." Sloane froze. Her voice dropped. "You were always loyal to her." Bram's face hardened. "No, I was loyal to the truth. Just kept it better than the rest of you." For the first time, Sloane looked afraid. By late morning, Grant sent his review findings to Willa. The chain was clear: default, ignored notices, vehicle misuse, false inventory presentation, risk to secured collateral, and enough movement of cars to justify immediate enforcement. Willa began preparing the court-backed recovery request. "This gives us the bridge," she told Mara. "Not emotion, not revenge, creditor rights." Mara nodded. "And the staff?" Willa turned to another document. "We include protection language, unpaid wages documented, honest staff retained under temporary receivership if approved, Bram listed as cooperating accountant, sales staff not blamed for executive decisions, assets preserved for lawful restructuring or sale." Mara's shoulders loosened slightly. "Good. Calder made this mess. They should not all drown in it." Willa filed the immediate enforcement request based on default, misuse of secured collateral, risk of asset disappearance, false inventory presentation, and creditor rights under the loan agreement. A court officer reviewed the filing. The orders were issued with supporting affidavits from Silver Ledger Holdings. At the bottom of the sworn creditor affidavit was Mara's signature. The same signature that had once helped Calder open his first dealership now supported the order that could empty his showroom. That afternoon, Willa's phone rang. She put it on speaker. Dane Rusk, 44-year-old licensed recovery supervisor assigned to carry out the court-backed repossession, spoke in a steady voice. "How many vehicles are we authorized to recover?" Willa looked at Mara. Mara opened the collateral list. The Porsche was highlighted. She stared at it for a long second, remembering Sloane's little wave from the passenger seat. Then Mara said, "All secured inventory. Start with the ones he used to lie." And far across town, under the showroom lights, the Porsche still waited for Prestige Week, shining like it did not know trucks were already being called. The first truck rolled through the dealership entrance just as Calder raised the microphone to his mouth. The music was still playing. The champagne was still bubbling. The black carpet was still clean. Cameras pointed toward the stage, where Calder stood beneath bright lights with Sloane beside him and the silver Porsche glowing behind them. For one perfect second, Vel Prestige Motors looked untouchable. Then the second truck arrived. Then the third. Then the fourth. The engines growled across the parking lot, deep and heavy, until every head in the showroom turned toward the glass walls. Calder froze on stage. Outside, a line of repossession trucks moved into place, blocking the entrance like a wall of steel. The music died. Sloane's smile disappeared. Enid sat in the front row, dressed in ivory and pearls, her face glowing with pride only moments earlier. Now her hand tightened around the armrest. The PR crew lowered their cameras in confusion. Then almost at the same time, they lifted them again. The disaster was more powerful than the event they had come to film. Calder forced a laugh into the microphone. "Small misunderstanding," he said. "Ladies and gentlemen, give us one moment." But his voice did not sound smooth anymore. A murmur spread through the crowd. Wealthy buyers whispered. Staff members looked at Bram, and Bram looked down at the floor as if he had been waiting for this sound for months. Calder stepped off stage and stormed toward the entrance. Dane Rusk stood outside with a folder in his hand and several licensed recovery agents behind him. The agents wore dark jackets and carried clipboards. They did not look angry, they looked prepared. Calder pushed through the glass doors. Who authorized this? Dane held out the court-backed recovery order. "We are here to recover secured collateral under creditor enforcement." Calder refused to take the papers. "This is private property. The secured collateral is subject to recovery," Dane said. Calder's face turned red. "These are my cars." Dane's voice stayed even. "They are listed collateral under a defaulted floor plan agreement." The word default moved through the crowd like smoke. Inside the showroom, Sloane walked quickly toward the Porsche. Her hand closed around the key fob as if holding it could make the car belong to her. Enid rose from her seat. "This is outrageous," she said loudly, as if volume could turn debt into disrespect. "Calder, do not let them bully you." Calder finally snatched the order from Dane's hand. He flipped through the pages with shaking fingers. Collateral list, default reference, court authorization, recovery instructions, creditor affidavit. Then he stopped. At the bottom of the affidavit, beneath the printed name Silver Ledger Holdings, a signature sat in blue ink, Mara Vell. The world seemed to narrow around that name. For Calder, it was not just a signature. It was handwriting he knew. The same careful letters that had filled out his first financing forms. The same steady hand that had corrected his early loan projections. The same signature that had once moved her savings into the reserve account that helped him open the first lot. Back then, her name had helped him rise. Now that same name had authorized the fleet outside his showroom. Calder's face lost color. "No," he whispered, then louder, as if the word could undo the ink. "No, she can't." A car door opened across the street. Mara stepped out of her old silver sedan. She wore a simple dark coat. No flashy jewelry, no dramatic expression. Willa stepped beside her holding another copy of the order. Calder stared at them both. Willa's voice was calm. "She already did." Guests began recording openly now. Phones rose, camera lights flashed. The live stream that was supposed to show Calder's success caught his collapse instead. Dane turned to the recovery agents. "Begin with the marked units." The agents moved. One went toward a black coupe near the entrance. Another checked the VIN on a white SUV. A third approached the Porsche. Sloane stepped in front of him. "That car is for the event." The agent checked his tablet, then the VIN near the windshield. "This car is listed collateral." Sloane looked at Calder. "You said it was yours." Calder's mouth opened, but no answer came. Bram stood near the service desk and said quietly, "He says that about a lot of things." Sloane shot him a hateful look, but it did not matter. The agent signaled for the flatbed. Porsche that had carried Sloane past Mara in the rain was now being prepared for removal in front of everyone. Mara watched from the edge of the lot. For one moment she was back in the rain without wanting to be. She saw Sloane's small wave, Calder's lowered window, the splash near her shoes, the sentence that had followed her all night. "Your little paycheck couldn't cover the tires." Now those same tires were being strapped down. Enid rushed toward Mara, her pearls bouncing against her throat. "Do something," she demanded. "You are still his wife." Mara looked at her with a calm so deep it almost frightened Enid. "I was his wife when he needed financing. I was his wife when your son let you insult me. I was his wife when he drove my best friend past me in a company car he did not own." Enid's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Behind them, Dane addressed the gathered staff and guests. "Vell Prestige Motors is under creditor enforcement following a default review. Review found unpaid debt, misuse of secured inventory, and risk to collateral. Recovery will proceed under court authorization." The words were plain, but they destroyed everything Calder had staged. The black carpet, the champagne, the cameras, the Porsche, his speech about no handouts, all of it became evidence of a lie. Calder saw people filming and lost control. He pointed at Mara and screamed, "You did this." Mara did not raise her voice. "No, Calder," she said. "I documented this." That stopped him for half a second, because everyone heard the difference. She had not keyed his car. She had not dragged Sloane by the hair. She had not shouted in the showroom. She had kept the papers, followed the law, and let his own signatures speak. The flatbed driver began lifting the Porsche. Sloane stepped back as the car rose inch by inch. The showroom watched. The woman who had waved from the passenger seat now stood empty-handed beside the stage. Calder looked down again at the order in his hand. His thumb rubbed over Mara's blue ink signature like he still could not believe it was real. His voice cracked. "You bought my debt?" Mara looked past him at the fleet taking the cars he had used to build his image. Then she answered, quietly enough that the silence had to carry it. "I bought the truth you kept financing." The showroom fell completely still, and for the first time since the doors opened, Calder had nothing loud enough to hide behind. "You bought my debt." Calder's voice tore through the half-empty showroom. The Porsche was gone now, strapped to a flatbed outside like a trophy being carried away from a defeated king. Two more luxury cars were already rolling toward the exit. Recovery agents moved with calm speed, checking VINs, matching paperwork, and ignoring Calder's rage. The crowd had stopped pretending this was still a sales event. Customers filmed. Staff whispered. The media crew kept their cameras pointed at the disaster. The black carpet that had been rolled out for wealthy buyers was now being stepped over by repossession agents carrying court orders. Calder stormed toward Mara, waving the creditor affidavit in his hand. "You bought my debt," he repeated. Mara stood beside Willa, calm in her dark coat. She did not step back. "I bought the debt you kept calling success." Calder laughed bitterly, but the laugh sounded broken. "With what? Your little salary?" The insult was supposed to cut her again. It had worked before. It had made her feel small in the service bay, small beside the Porsche, small under Sloane's wave and Enid's smile. But not now. Now every car leaving the showroom proved he had never understood money at all. Mara looked at him and said, "My salary was never the whole story." The room quieted. She continued, not loudly, but clearly enough for everyone near the stage to hear. "I had savings, investments, family finance contacts. A company you never cared enough to ask about. While you were measuring money by engines and showroom lights, I was measuring it by ownership." Calder's face tightened. Mara looked toward the empty space where the Porsche had stood. "You judged money by what people could see. I judged it by what people could prove." Willa opened a folder and stepped forward. She was not dramatic. She did not need to be. The documents were dramatic enough. "These records show Mrs. Vell's savings contribution to the original financing," Willa said. "They show her family contact helped support the first lender review. They show her work on the early restructuring plan, copies of Calder's signed obligations, and the floor plan terms that govern the inventory." The media crew moved closer. Willa turned another page. "They also show repeated lender notices, missed payments, misuse of secured inventory, and false presentation of dealership assets." The truth spread through the room like a stain Calder could not wipe away. There were two frauds now. The first was financial. The second was emotional. Calder had not only misled lenders about the health of the dealership, he had lied to everyone about being self-made. Enid pushed forward, her face stiff with panic. "Mara manipulated everyone," she said. "My son is a visionary. This is jealousy dressed up as paperwork." Mara looked at her with tired eyes. For years, Enid's words had entered her like needles. Quiet digs, polite insults, little reminders that Mara was useful only when Calder was struggling. But now Enid's voice sounded smaller against the sound of cars being removed. Before Mara could answer, a man in a charcoal suit entered with two assistants and a sealed packet. Evan Dole, 57-year-old court-appointed receiver assigned to take temporary control of Vell Prestige Motors, secured assets during creditor enforcement, walked straight to Willa and Dane. He reviewed the order, nodded, then turned to Calder. "Mr. Vell, effective immediately, you are removed from operational control of the secured dealership assets." Calder's eyes widened. "You can't remove me from my own business." Evan's voice stayed even. "You are being removed from operational control due to creditor enforcement and risk to secured assets. The court order allows temporary control while the inventory is recovered, sold, stabilized, or restructured." Calder looked at Mara like she had personally pushed him out the door, but she had not touched him. The law had. That was what made it worse for him. He could shout at Mara, he could insult her, he could blame her. But he could not shout the signatures off the documents he had ignored. Evan faced the staff. Employees who were not involved in executive misconduct will be reviewed for temporary retention. Payroll claims will be documented. Cooperating staff will be protected where possible during the transition. Bram stood near the reception desk, holding the old framed photo he had saved from the trash. His eyes filled, but he fought to keep his face steady. Mara turned to him. You should not lose your job because he lost his character. Bram lowered his head, overwhelmed. That simple sentence did what Calder had not done in months. It made the staff feel human. Sloane had been quiet too long. She started moving toward a side exit, her heels clicking fast against the marble floor. In one hand, she still held the Porsche key fob. A dealership credit card peeked from her small designer bag. Around her wrist was the branded watch Calder had charged through the business for event styling. Mara's voice stopped her. You do not get to leave with company property. Sloane turned slowly. For the first time, her confidence looked thin. An agent stepped beside her with a checklist. Sloane had to hand over the key fob, the credit card, the watch, and receipts for clothing expenses billed to the dealership. Her face burned. She looked at Mara and snapped. You were never enough for him. Mara did not flinch. Maybe, but I was enough to read the documents he signed. The insult died before it reached her. Calder turned on Sloane, desperate for someone else to blame. You told me to ignore the notices. Sloane's eyes flashed. You wanted someone to tell you your fantasy was real. Their alliance cracked in front of everyone. The mistress who had waved from the Porsche now stood exposed as another unpaid luxury. Enid tried one last time. My son built this place. Bram stepped forward and placed the old framed photo on the empty reception desk. In it, young Calder and Mara stood in front of the first tiny lot, smiling beside 4 used cars and cracked pavement. Bram's voice shook, but it carried. Mrs. Vell kept this business alive before any of us had marble floors to stand on. The showroom went silent. Everyone looked at the photo. The lie of self-made success died there, under the same lights Calder had bought to celebrate himself. Outside, the final luxury car was driven onto a truck. Calder looked around. No Porsche, no applause, no Sloane defending him, no mother able to protect his image, only empty spaces where his pride used to sit. He turned to Mara, his face twisted with anger and fear. You ruined me. Mara looked at the old photo, then at the empty showroom, then back at the man she had once loved enough to protect from everything. No, she said softly. I stopped protecting the ruin. Calder opened his mouth to answer, but Evan stepped between them with one final packet. And when Calder saw the words divorce filing beneath Mara's name, even his anger went quiet. You turned my life into a public execution. Calder's voice slammed across the mediation room. The table between him and Mara was covered with folders, evidence, divorce papers, asset schedules, receiver reports, peril claims, photos, messages, copies of ignored lender notices. Every sheet looked calm, but together they told a story Calder could no longer shout over. Mara sat across from him with Willa beside her. Her face was still, but her eyes were tired, not weak, not afraid, just tired of carrying a man who had mistaken her love for permission. Dale Mercer, 54-year-old court-approved divorce mediator assigned to Calder and Mara's settlement, raised one hand. Mr. Vell, we need to stay focused. Calder ignored him. She did this because I stopped loving her, he said, pointing at Mara. That is what this is, revenge. Willa placed one thick evidence file on the table and slid it forward. Mara looked at Calder and said, No, I did this because I stopped lying for you. The room went quiet. For the first time, Calder looked down at the file instead of at her face. That was where the truth lived now, not in his version, not in Enid's version, not in Sloane's polished little lies, in paper. Weeks had passed since Prestige Week collapsed. Vell Prestige Motors no longer looked like a kingdom. The showroom was almost empty. Dust outlines marked the places where luxury cars used to sit. The black carpet had been rolled up. The champagne bar was dry. The banners still hung from the ceiling, but now they looked like decorations for the funeral of Calder's ego. He had lost the Porsche. The inventory, operational control, lender trust, staff loyalty, his public image, his mistress. His marriage, and worst of all, he had lost the lie that he was self-made. Dale opened the first folder. The record includes proof of marital misconduct, public humiliation, company asset misuse, creditor enforcement, and business debt default. Calder shook his head. This is excessive. Willa's voice stayed calm. The record includes your affair with Sloane, the public dumping of your wife, the Incom mockery, improper use of company vehicles, ignored notices, payroll delays, and false inventory presentation. It also includes Mrs. Vell's original financing support and proof of her savings contribution. Calder's mouth tightened. Mara did not smile. Winning did not feel like dancing. It felt like finally setting down something heavy after years of pretending it did not hurt. Cross town, Evan was managing what remained of the dealership. Under the receiver's control, some secured assets had been sold lawfully. Payroll claims were being reviewed. Honest employees were being offered continued work under new management or fair payment through proper claims. Bram became part of the transition team. When Mara visited the emptied showroom one last time, he met her near the reception desk, holding a box of old files and the framed photo from the first used car lot. "I thought this belonged with you," he said. Mara looked at the photo. Young Calder stood beside her on cracked pavement, smiling like hope itself had chosen him. Mara remembered that day with a pain so gentle it almost fooled her into missing him. Then she remembered the Porsche splashing rain near her shoes. She took the photo. "You should not lose your job because he lost his character," she told Bram. His eyes filled, but he only nodded. That was the difference between Mara and Calder. Calder had used people as mirrors. Mara still saw them as people. Sloane's end came quietly, and that made it worse for her. She lost her position, her access to the dealership cards, the borrowed luxury, and the public role she had tried to steal. Photos from Prestige Week spread through staff circles and client phones. Not just the repossession, but the earlier event shots too. Sloane with the Porsche key. Sloane beside Calder. Sloane waving from the passenger seat. She tried to tell people she had not known anything, but the charges, photos, and recovered messages told a different story. One evening, Mara saw her outside the dealership, standing near the curb with a suitcase and her phone pressed to her ear. No Porsche, no stage, no Calder defending her. The woman who had waved from the passenger seat now had to call for a ride. Mara did not stop. There was nothing left to say to someone who had known her wounds and still chosen to press on them. Enid tried once more. She found Mara outside the mediation office, her pearls still on, her voice still sharp. "You should have stayed loyal," Enid said. Mara looked at her for a long moment. "I was loyal. That is why it took me so long to leave." Enid opened her mouth, but no insult came out strong enough. Her power had depended on Mara needing approval. Mara no longer needed anything from her. Later, in her new office, Mara stood alone beneath a fresh sign that read Silver Ledger Advisory. It was not flashy. There was no champagne wall, no spotlight, no polished Porsche in the center of the room. Just clean desks, strong contracts, and a quiet promise to help small business owners restructure debt before pride destroyed them. On the wall, she hung the old photo from the first used car lot, not because she wanted Calder back. Because she refused to let anyone erase the woman she had been. Her phone buzzed. A message from Calder appeared. "You know I loved you before all this." Mara stared at it. For a second, she remembered the young man on cracked pavement. The man who once held her hand under a bank table and promised everyone would know she was the reason. Then she remembered the man who had shouted that her little paycheck could not cover the tires on the Porsche. She deleted the message. Outside, the evening light touched her old silver sedan. It was not flashy. It was not loud. It was fully paid for. It belonged to her. Nobody could repossess it. Nobody could use it to humiliate her. Mara drove away from the empty dealership road without looking back. Calder had thought power was a Porsche, a showroom, and a crowd clapping while he lied. Mara had learned power was quieter. It was the document he ignored, the signature he mocked, the proof she kept, and the moment she stopped protecting a man who only loved her when she made him feel bigger. At the next red light, Mara's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from a woman whose small repair shop was drowning in debt. Mara read the first line, lifted her eyes to the road ahead, and knew her next battle would not be for revenge. It would be for someone who still had time to be saved. And this time, Mara would not stand behind someone else's dream. She would walk through the door with her own name on it. Dear viewers, if this story reminded you of someone who was mocked, erased, or underestimated, subscribe and stand with them. Comment where you are watching from.